Welcome to this video. I'm Robots Are Red, and this is the Oxi Coral. Coral by Oxi Instruments is a 14 HP polyphonic multi-part synthesizer. That's right, a full and robust polyphonic synthesizer with effects and everything, all on just one 14 HP module. Now, the best way to think of this module is basically 8 Mutable Instruments Plaits in one. Now, the Coral can be played with your basic volt per octave and trigger or gate inputs, or an envelope in the amp input. But where it gets really fun is with the TRS Midi input, which is type A if you're wondering. Now, it of course works great with the Oxi One sequencer, but you could use virtually any MIDI controller and get control of all the goodness that the Coral has to offer. And it's worth noting that the Coral is still growing and expanding with constant new software updates and new things added. I got word that upcoming next is a delay effect, along with additional synth engines. Now first I'm going to start with a super quick interface walkthrough to get you started as quick as possible. Then I'll do a more in-depth demo walkthrough of all the features and functions of the module, followed by a little jam at the end. Now before we go to this quick walkthrough, there are two things we need to do. First, we need to take this SD card and put it in our computer and check what the software version is on the Coral. And check that against the Oxi website's latest firmware for the Coral. And if you need to update the software, which you probably do, considering when I got the module, I had like a real early version of the firmware on it. So what we're going to do is unplug our module, go over to our computer with our USB micro, and we're going to plug into there when it prompts us on the firmware update walkthrough on Oxi's website. And now that we're all good and up to date with everything, we can get going with the walkthrough. So to break down this module as simple as possible, we're going to break it down into 4 parts. We have our main control knob, which does specific functions. Then we have our pink section, which I'll call our plat section. We have the yellow section, which is our filter section, and the blue and purple section, which is our envelope generator section. And now it's best to think of this module, despite all the additional effects and stuff, it's like 8 plats all in one. So we could be running 8 separate plat engines all at once on different MIDI channels or on the same channel in Unison, whatever we want to do. Now, without pressing anything down or doing any additional functions, the center knob here selects our synth engine. Now, there are 9 synth engines from Mutable Instruments Plaits, which are the first 9, and then the 10th is the wave player. Now, I'm not going to go too far into the plat section here because I'm going to assume you kind of already know the gist of plats with the different engine choices and our harm, timbre, morph, and frequency adjustments. And these knobs act the same way, except for the wave player, we have folder selection and sound selection, and then we have an overdrive. And it's worth noting that the frequency and octave shift are flipped here, so the bass knob does our octaves, and then the secondary function does the fine-tune frequency adjustment, which is great because we're always in tune just right out of the box. And that is what brings us to the next feature, is we see the white text here below some of these knobs, and that is the secondary function of those knobs. And we do that by holding down the center encoder and turning each specific knob. And we could select our MIDI channel, noise, chorus, fine-tune, adjust the level, add a space reverb effect, adjust the panning, and you could even adjust CV amounts with these knobs down here. Now on the MIDI, by default, each part is automatically selected. So I have all the parts selected right now. So I can adjust the engine, on all of them at once, and we could see we get polyphony here with MIDI real easy. But say we want a mono track, and then we want the polyphony on another track. So we could select all the parts at once and change the MIDI to channel 2 for our polyphony. And then we go and select part 1 and change that MIDI back to channel 1. And to do that, we press the center encoder and we turn it. So we see it's green. Green is for the groups of parts, which we'll show in a second. But then purple is our individual tracks. Now it starts off at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I said tracks, I meant parts. And then it selects all of them. So I have all of them selected right now, and I hold that down and I could change my MIDI channel. It's at 1, and let's go to 2. So now it's not playing anything from my MIDI channel 1 right now. But if I go to MIDI channel 2, it's playing everything here. But now we need to go back to channel 1 to get that mono track. So I'm going to click, and I'm going to go and select just channel 1, and I'm going to go to the MIDI and go back to channel 1. And I could change this independent of channel 2. So we can see I have 2 channels playing at once. Let's mute one. And the other one. Now let's show those groups I was talking about. So now when we scroll through, pressing and holding the encoder, we get green, and it'll show us the first track, the rest of the tracks, and those are our 2 groups, and we could select all with the purple. So we have 1 group and 2 groups. And that's just an easy way to select your groups based on what MIDI channel they are assigned to, and it just groups everything by the MIDI channel, which makes sense. And now let's go into these bottom sections here. First we have the filter envelope, and then we have our filter cutoff and our filter resonance. Now this is only a low-pass filter. We can close it and open it, but we could also apply an envelope to that filter. At 12 o'clock, it is off, and it's an attenuverter, so it's going to apply positive voltage or negative voltage. And we can adjust our res here to hear that better. And with this, we're going to actually jump over to the purple here, which is our envelope generators for the filter, or our mod envelope generator. And we have our attack, and our decay and release. And the sustain is shared with our regular envelope generator. So we jump over here, and we have our attack, decay and release. Again, the decay and release are tied together, so we have the second and the fourth part of the ADSR tied together. So you could easily get a nice low-pass filter type effect. Or swelling, more Moog style filter. Now this is all great, but say we want to save our settings or load our settings, all you do is just tap the encoder, and that is load mode. Tap it again, we get save mode. Tap it again, and we get CV mode. And tap it again, we get to our base screen. CV mode we'll get into in just a second, but we want to save it. So we go to our save, we select our destination, let's go to that one there, and press the encoder, and it's saved. And now I can load up a totally different engine, and then on the fly, load up this engine we just had. Now talking about the CV. So we go to our CV select, and we can select our groups. So we have group 1 and group 2. We're going to select group 1. So now all our CV inputs are going to affect just that part. So now we see when I put in some voltage, I just have growing voltage here on the pressure points. So 0 volts, more, and then up to 5 volts. And we see here, now it affects our attack and decay time together. Or we get a filter control. We'll get to part in just a second. Now we have harmony control. Timbre control. Morph control. And this offsets based on what the setting is initially. And then we have our trig, amp, and octave. So I'll stop this to show the amp. It just opens up the amplifier so we could have it more as a basic synthesizer. I could plug a gate into the trigger. And let's throw some voltage into the volt per octave. And now we'll see what the part does here, which the part is basically our CV selection screen. So we have our CV selection screen, and that immediately gets overridden when we plug into the part here. So we could see when it gets higher voltage, it basically divides our groups up evenly among the voltage range. So 0 to 2.5 volts, we're going to get control of this first engine. Now, if we get the voltage higher, past 2.5 volts, we access that other group of those 7 engines. So we could affect the MIDI inputs on that one. So that's a good way to jump between things. With some external control. You could even just have an attenuator knob sending out base voltage and use that to control your parts easily. Think of it as a little expander. And then we have this MIDI input, of course, which we've been using, and it's just a general headphone, TRS cable, stereo cable. And that sends all the MIDI data from 16 tracks, CC values, everything you need, just in the one cable. I don't know how they do it with just the TRS cable. And that is the base overview of Coral. Now, there are additional features if you look through the manual, but I covered pretty much everything you could do with this, aside from some updates and other new parameters and things like that. So now let's turn this into an 8-part or just multi-part Groovebox. It's not just one synthesizer, it's 8. And remember, we have that wave player in there. All right, now let's build an 8-part, or rather a multi-part little Groovebox synthesizer with the Coral and the Oxi One as my sequencer. So right now everything is going into MIDI channel 1, and it's just polyphony going to all the different parts. But I know that I want polyphony on MIDI channel 3, and I'm going to use channel 1 for my bass lead, channel 2 for my lead, and then I'm going to use the end channels for the drums. So we'll start. I know I'm going to use channel 3 for that polyphony, so I'm going to select everything and assign that to MIDI channel 3. So everything stopped because I'm only sending MIDI to channel 3 right now. And now I could go and select channel 1 and assign that to MIDI channel 1, and we're back at channel 1, and we can get this to our nice bass settings that we want. Okay, great. Now we have a bass line. Now we want to add, say, a kick. So I'm going to go to the end channel. So I'm going to go to part 8. And I'm going to select part 8. And I know my kick is going to be on MIDI channel 4. So we're getting that to the engine that we had. So we could select the different engine for it. And let's go to the kick. Okay, now I want to go to part 7. And I'm going to assign that to MIDI channel 5. And let's go to the snare. Add some noise. Add a little panning to the snare. Maybe a little bit of space. And now we want our chords. So I'm going to go to channel 3 here, and let's play some chords. Let's go to our group selection there, and now we can make our chord adjustments here, though I just have single notes. Alright, now I have the chords all set up here. And now let's jump over to our main lead. So we're going to select part 2. See part 2 selected, and we'll go to MIDI channel 2. And now we have our lead on channel 2. Now I have our lead. And now let's add some hi-hats. So I'm going to go, so we have part 8, 7, and we'll go to 6 for our hi-hats. And we'll assign that to MIDI channel 6. And now we have hi-hats. And now I have a full band basically playing of a lead, a bass, chords, and drums. All in one module coming from one MIDI device. And now let's look at the volt per octave polyphony settings and how those differ with the settings on the SD card. Okay, so I have volt per octave plugged into the Coral here, and I have all the parts, all 8 parts, playing in unison right now. So what I do to one, it does to all. So it's just one big synth. But you can't really tell the difference with the different parts because they're all exactly the same. So what we can do is we could go in and individually change some of them. Go do that. I'll change the next one, and I'll put the frequency off a little bit. Give us a little bit of a unison. And that is the nice thing with the Unison mode for the Coral. And now, let me reset this and I'll show you the Poly mode. So to get to the Poly mode, we're going to turn off the module, take out the SD card, plug it into one of these fancy schmancy things, and plug that into our computer. We're going to go into the settings and the options text file, and we're going to change the Poly settings to 1 from 0, setting it to Poly mode from Unison mode. Okay, got that changed. Now I'm plugging it in, powering it back on. And to be safe, I'm going to load what we had before. And now I have it in Poly mode, so we could see. Now notice it is activating all the different parts separately instead of in unison. So we can play some chords. Let's turn our sustain all the way up. So we see if I play chords and I kind of roll the chords, we can play chords with just 1 volt per octave input. Kind of like Mutable Instruments rings, red mode for the polyphony. But with this, we get up to 8 instead of just 4. And now, let's just listen to some music. That's all for this video on the Oxi Coral. If you like this and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.